Hello, and welcome to Aaron's Not So Slightly Biased Character Analysis, Episode 2. This is a series where I talk about a character I know and a medium I enjoy. Books, movies, TV shows, whatever. You know the gist, right? Right? As a reminder, I go over the things I like about the character, things I dislike, though I didn't really find anything I disliked about this particular character, whether I like the character or not, etc. I like to do the amateur psychoanalysis thing, but here's a disclaimer, I'm doing this for fun. I don't have a legitimate degree or even training for doing that, just speculation for speculation's sake. You know, like an Infodump for funsies. Got it? Okay, cool. So, let's talk about today's character, shall we? Today's character is a fandom favorite from my all-time favorite show, Final Space. And yeah, if you know Final Space, you know who this character is. It's the one I'm drawing, right here. You see him? He's right here. He's awesome. He's cute. He's little Cato. Now, the version I'm drawing is a aged-up version because in the show we only ever see him as a 14-year-old cat boy and a 74-year-old cat man. So this version is more around the 30s-ish kind of age, and honestly his head shape as a kid is kind of hard for me to draw somehow. I don't get it. Voiced by Steven Yeun, Little Cato is the ginger son of the tuxedo bounty hunter Avocado, which you can probably tell based on the names. Now, to avoid major spoilers, I'll only be talking about Season 1 Little Cato, and admittedly, there's a lot that happens to this kid in Season 1, and a lot of it is pretty heavy, so this might be a longer video. Obligatory spoiler alert for Season 1 of Final Space. So, let's go! Come on, Aaron, this isn't a freaking Mario video, stop doing the Mario thing. Little Cato is a Ventrexian, which is an alien species that highly resembles, in both appearance and mannerism, the anthropomorphized version of an Earth cat, like the one that is currently trying to seek my attention. They're a race that is constantly embroiled in war, sound familiar, with a species called the Trivulians, whom we aren't introduced to until Season 2. And because of that war, both Little Cato and Avocado are trained to fight. Now, bear in mind, Little Cato is 14. Not only that, but at the point where we meet him for about 2 seconds in episode 2, he's been in prison for 3 years. That means whatever training he received, he'd received it by the age of 11, and considering he's pretty decent with a blaster with little sign of rust from his imprisonment, we can infer that he'd been trained from a very young age. Have we all seen Steven Universe Future? Do we all know how traumatizing it can be for a kid to go through combat training at a young age? I mean, I know both of these are cartoons, but Little Cato is at a very impressionable age. Basically anything can turn into a future trauma for him to respond to. And the fact that he was 11 years old and shooting a blaster, well, I'm not too confident in his future mental health. So, at the beginning, or, well, in the middle of episode 2, we see him in a cell on the destroyed planet turned space station, Terracon Prime. On that note, having it written out on my script and kind of immersed in learning Spanish, it just kind of looks like they were trying to say Earth with cousin. It's not clear whether this has been the cell he's been in for all of the 3 years Avocado was searching for him, but that doesn't really matter, right? He's had his freedom restricted for 3 years. Also pretty bad for a kid's mental health. After episode 2's failed attempt at breaking him out, we see him being shipped off to a different prison, which we eventually learn is the high-security prison colony of the Lord Commander Zetacron Alpha. Judging by this naming convention, and knowing almost nothing of how NASA names the planets it discovers, I'm gonna guess that the main planet, the one on the freaking left, Gary, is the Alpha, while the secondary planet they accidentally land on first is called Beta. That's just speculation, though. While in the prison, we get our first look into his personality in a pretty innocuous way: beatboxing. This kid, this literal young teen, is sitting in the middle of a prison cell, a pretty big one actually. The kid's got VIP treatment. Not trying to escape, meaning he's probably already tried and given up. The only thing he can do is sit around and beatbox. And he's pretty decent at it. Then again, I don't really know anything about beatboxing. The most electronic sounding noise I can make is that high-pitched whine I made when Olan announced the Final Space Ends graphic novel. But even if I'm wrong and Little Cato's beatboxing is actually bad, at least he's keeping a rhythm. Props, kid. He's chillin'. He doesn't see a way out of his situation yet, and he's making a musical out of it instead of freaking out. Knowing cats, he'll probably get the zoomies later on and freak the hell out of his neighbors, but for now, he's keeping his spirits up. Then he receives help. A small communicator, I assume, judging from how he ends up using it to record a message. But hey, it could just be some kind of sci-fi calculator that happens to have a camera attached to it. I don't know. You don't know. We could both be wrong. I mean, everyone was wrong about cell phones getting smaller in the future. We could have had Amy Wong's tiny little thumbnail-sized flip phone. But instead we have this. Did I digress again? Oops, I need to stop going on tangents. Anyway, so he receives a transmitter thingy thing from someone he can't see, and who says maybe a few words to him before going radio silent. Spoilers, but it's the Lord Commander. The little toad put together a stupid little rigmarole to make little Cato do what he wanted. Now, this isn't a plot hole I'm prodding, it's a thing that actually makes sense for the Lord Commander if you know what he's all about. But he gets his own video that I'll talk about this in. The things little Cato has to do is, 1. Record the message to his father without being discovered. 2. Get the communicator to a transmitting station to amplify the signal so it'll actually get sent. 3. Nothing wrong with me. 4. Nothing wrong with... Oh, sorry. Got a song stuck in my head. 3. Once he gets to the transmitting station, he has to input a password to get into the thing. 4. Question marks? He's out of his cell. I'm not sure what he was planning here. Maybe to go somewhere and hide until the message sends and Avocado arrives to rescue him? I don't know. Disregarding the aforementioned rigmarole, he's willing to trust a stranger he can't see, except as a silhouetted hologram who, upon multiple watchings, looked a little bit to me like Season 3 Ash, even though that's probably a coincidence, to help him out of imprisonment. Maybe that's a little bit of naivety? But he's literally 14. How many times have you been scammed as a teenage cat boy from a war planet? How much experience did you have as a young teenager to avoid this kind of crap? Oh, that's what I thought. He's taken in by her expressing familiarity. We share the same enemy, and we fight the same war. And he trusts her because what else is he gonna do? Keep beatboxing in a cell on Zetacron Alpha for the rest of eternity? Come to think of it, why didn't Avocado check Zetacron Alpha first if he worked for the Lord Commander and was kind of his right-hand man? Didn't he happen to maybe think, hey, I'm head of this army and my son was taken hostage by the guy I work for. Maybe I should check his biggest prison. Did he even know about that prison? Anyway. His message to Avocado breaks my heart a little. We clearly see both Ventrexians care about each other. Avocado betrayed Gary and killed Turk in an attempt to rescue his son. Little Cato freaked out when he saw Avocado there to rescue him because he knew it was a trap. And yet, the contents of Little Cato's message are, "Hey Dad, here are my coordinates. Come find me. I mean, at your leisure, but, for me, preferably fast." At your leisure?! I mean, yeah, this is a joke. This kind of self-deprecating humor is very present in this show. Between Little Cato, Gary, and later on Ash, this is very on brand for Final Space. But putting that context aside, if you were a kid who's been kidnapped and you were sending your parents the address, would you be like, "Hey, so I know you're busy, but if you could come rescue me, that'd be pretty poggers," or whatever the teens say nowadays? No, you'd be like, "Ma, call the cops, bring the crowbars, this interstellar tyrant is being a jerkwad." Or, well, I would be, leaving aside the semantics of my situation. I don't know about the younger generation anymore. Y'all make different jokes than I used to in the same sort of self-deprecating vein, but with different vernacular than I grew up with. Insert topical verbiage here because I'm totally hip and cool. Once Little Cato falls for the Lord Commander's ruse and our gnomish villain reveals himself in evil samurai I've been here the whole time fashion, we see a moment of panic. This kid's now been the bait for 2 traps for his father since the beginning of the show. I don't know about you, but I feel super freaking guilty about my part in the Lord Commander's plans. But let's remember here that it's never your fault if you are manipulated into doing bad things by someone with a power dynamic. This goes for real life too, outside the whole "let's talk about cute cartoon cats who have way too much thrown at them" aspect of what I'm talking about. If you've ever been manipulated by someone in a position of power over you, don't let it get to you. It was never your fault. Back to the jokes, though. Where's the Lord Commander's ukulele response to these allegations? And then, the poor kid gets mind-warped into dumbass mode. Or, well, that's what I call it when my cat sees a toy and her pupils fill up her eyes. It's adorable. Maybe less so for little Cato in this instance, though. Once more being used as a pawn to lure Avocado and Gary, because apparently the Lord Commander is obsessed with playing games, even though there would be a much better path to getting what he wants if he just goes, "Hey, Avocado, here's his coordinates, come find him. I mean, at your leisure, but for his sake, I hope you're fast." After this, he's pretty thoroughly brainwashed. Not for long, mainly to lure his father in a creepy way towards the trap, and probably with the Lord Commander's attention split between mind melding with two people, maybe it was weakened a little bit. But we see during his fight with Avocado that there's a small part of him fighting back, when Avocado begs him not to let the Lord Commander ruin him, and he replies, "What if it's too late?" Initially, upon breaking free of the brainwashing, we see his initial response is to punch his dad for, quote, taking too long. This, I think, is indicative of their overall relationship, the military training being a big part of it, the implication that Avocado doesn't hug his son very often. I mean, I didn't get hugged by my mom very often, and now I'm anti-touch, just putting that out there, and it makes me very glad that Gary steps up later on in taking care of him, because Gary strikes me as a very huggy guy. And the thing little Cato says later, after Gary says, "He cared about you to the max core," he replies, "He never said that to me." This, I think, makes little Cato's development into neurodivergencies makes a little more sense. He has a need to prove himself, despite being more than capable of carrying out any task they need him to do, seen more prominently in Season 2's episode The Other Side, which I'll get to at a later date. He's got a couple more things, but I'll get to those after I touch on the biggest, most heart-wrenching part of the season. Episode 6. I mean, I've been talking about Episode 6 mostly in this episode, in regards to the whole brainwashing part of the scene, but if you've seen Final Space, you'll know exactly what scene I mean when I say Episode 6. It's the scene Olan loves to torture us with. It's the scene that simultaneously broke everyone's heart. Like if you cry every time, that scene. The Lord Commander, with what looks to be his final breath, telekinetically and stealthily places an armed bomb on a freaking child! And when Avocado finds it, he takes it and runs, getting the bomb away from everyone else on the ship before it can go off, and sacrificing him in the process. I honestly would not be surprised if little Cato didn't have survivor's guilt from that. Actually, we see that he does later on, but we'll get to that in a later video. Afterwards, once little Cato's kind of more or less established on the ship, he does a thing that we cat owners are familiar with in regards to adopting a new cat and welcoming it into our homes. He finds a hiding place and disappears. Clearly curious about his new roommates, as we see him watching Gary gorge himself on cookies before accidentally breaking off the vent and running off. But I mean, he's a kid who just watched his dad explode. That's 2 dad-splosions in this series so far, if anybody's keeping count. He did what Gary did. Withdrew into a small area that he made his own. He had a space in the vents, Gary had his treehouse, it's kind of, yeah, they've got parallels there. Parallels. And if anyone here watched the last Final Space Infodump video, the Gary one, you may remember my theory about cookies. Here's where I'll draw a comparison with a different series entirely, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Spoilers if you haven't read it, and I encourage you to read it because it's a very good series and we stand Rick Riordan on this channel. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. In The Titan's Curse, Bianca D'Angelo dies, leaving her brother Nico. In the 3rd book, Battle of the Labyrinth, we see Nico destroying his childhood game of Mythomagic, claiming he couldn't believe he used to like this kid's game. Now, if you remember my theory about the cookie symbolism in Final Space, it's that it's a visual metaphor for the childhood Gary wanted and never got. Drawing these two things together, it's easy to see the pattern. A child sees or experiences the death of a loved one, and then decides they need to grow up. In both cases, feeling very angry or hateful towards the thought of childhood. Little Cato says, "These cookies suck." Nico says the game is childish. There's probably a deeper psychological thingy thing here pertaining to childhood trauma, but I'm not qualified to speak on it. Again, this is all pure speculation. Nerdy infodumping for nerds. If you'd like to do the research, make sure you look up cited articles and stuff, not just goofballs on YouTube drawing unresearched conclusions. Literally drawing. See, it's funny, because I'm drawing. Puns. And then there's also the fact that little Cato is apparently desensitized to the thought of unaliving someone, specifically describing quite a dark image of splashing in life juice. I'm with Gary, that's pretty dark. But at the same time, I don't think it's especially surprising when you think about the kids in real life. Like, what games are kids playing these days? COD? Fortnite? Solitaire? Kids be raunchy in them online voice lobbies. I don't like multiplayer online games, so I don't have any first-hand knowledge about that, but man, I've heard rumors with a capital R. So yeah, while we adults don't think kids should be saying violent crap like that, kids are gonna kid, especially if we tell them not to. Quick, someone more qualified than me, do a reverse psychology! But it's after the failure of this half-baked revenge mission against the ship in the Lord Commander's Armada that we see little Cato's true feelings. After he's knocked out and then fakes being unconscious in order to eavesdrop on the two Airgons and the Gary, he hears that Nightfall, Quinn's sexy future counterpart, has a ship that doubles as a time machine. He decides to try and steal? Borrow? I don't know. I'm not really sure of his end goal here. Well, obviously the end goal was to try and go back before Avocado's death and save him before he can blow up, but I'm not really sure if he was going to return the... You know what? It doesn't matter. The time machine initiated a self-destruct sequence and ended up imploding into temporal ocean gate chunks. Too soon? But, before it implodes, Gary's desperately trying to save him from the outside. Nightfall breaks in because she's badass and hot and has a cool lightsaber spear thingy. Cool it, Aaron, this isn't the Nightfall video. And Gary reaches in through the hole she cuts in to try and grab little Cato's hand. And then the second most heartbreaking line in the season so far is uttered. It's all my fault, he died because of me. A child should never have to feel like they're the reason their parent is dead. I mean, I'm not a parent, I don't even consider myself a pet parent. I'm not Athena's parent, I'm her human. But I can guess a lot of parents would be willing to lay down their life if their child was in danger. And I'd be willing to bet that any parent who would prefer their child not feel guilty for it. I'm sure Avocado would prefer little Cato just live on and not beat himself up for the fact that Avocado was dead. He'd probably argue that it was the Lord Commander's fault anyway. And it is the Lord Commander's fault, god dang it! This is where little Cato and Gary can relate to each other. It's not the greatest thing to be related to, but at least in that you can have a kinship. It's great to know you're not alone, even in a thing that no one should have to experience. In that pain, you have someone you can lean on. Gary probably doesn't feel the same level of guilt about the death of his own father since he wasn't directly involved, but the fact that both were dad-splosions, well, it's kind of a morbid twinsies thing. What Gary says here, you're not alone, we'll get through this together, as a team, as a squad, as a team squad. I think it's resonating to little Cato. I think it's pretty monumental. He's seen Gary blubber like a comical baby about this, and also saw the lengths Gary was willing to go through to help him through the grief. Where before he thought Gary was about to take advantage of his newfound freedom and gallivant off somewhere else, he instead sees a guy that's willing to stay and help him. And then he sees in chapter, I think, 8, just how well he can relate to Gary. He finds out through Bolo about the dead explosion of John Goodspeed, and later says, "I didn't realize we were part of the same club." And while he was already resolved to be part of the team squad before that, I think that revelation really solidified their bond. Despite a lack of connection to Earth like the rest of the team has, he's willing to go the distance with them. It's really a shame that Gary's little stunt of crashing the Galaxy 1 into the Lord Commander's ship threw off his unaliving attempt on the little moldy tic-tac. But hey, wouldn't have the rest of the story if Gary had been able to just step over the carcass and rescue Mooncake and save Earth. The last shot we see of little Cato is just the poor kid being thrown out to space and floating unconscious. Considering he's already been grabbed and established as Clarence's wash boy at the beginning of Season 2, I doubt he was there for very long, but hey, it still freaking stinks. In his own eyes, he probably just failed at avenging his father. But hey, at least someone... Wait, We have to wait till season 2 to see whether the Lord Commander dies at the end? Lame! Just like last video, I don't want to end on such a depressing note, so here's a few things I like about little Cato. The freaking sass on this child! He's so sassy! And I'm not just saying that as the gatekeeper from Bolo's Mind Fortress. Or am I? Olan Rogers has confirmed that little Cato's gay. We kind of missed out on a date night, like a canon date night, like what we get in season 3 with spoilers. But fortunately, the fandom has provided with plenty of boyfriends to pick from. Drop your favorite little Cato boyfriend OCs down below. Maybe I'll look them up. Maybe I'll make my own. Make him a little bit adorable little cuddly cat boys. And the complementary color scheme. I mean, sort of. Orange and blue are complementary, but the yellow's a bit different. It's a good color scheme. I'm liking it, okay? Shut up. Anyone notice how the 2 confirmed queer characters in the show wear the same style of skirt and leggings? Just me? Okay. And I will always love how the feline-adjacent voice actors incorporate cat noises into their voice work with their characters. As someone who plays a tabaxi in D&D at my friend's store, I really appreciate it! Wow! Yes, I'm aware that sounds like Biscuit. That was not intentional. That's just how Keen talks. This kid is not incompetent. He's a good marksman. Despite how I feel about kids in war, this one's skilled. Like holy craptastic Sparkplugs skilled. Did you see him in Chapter 9? Holy crow! Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with my info dump? Are there headcanons I should include in the next little Cato analysis? Which character should I cover next? Is my info dump even coherent? Doesn't matter how coherent it is. Like and subscribe for more content. I am planning on doing way more analyses for more characters, shows, books, etc. in the future, so stay tuned. Next one will probably be on my playthrough thus far of Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, as I've been goofing around on Early Access. And I'll see you on the next one. Aaron out.